It is a story about choices,
Grace is absolutely indispensable in a time like that, trusting the grace of God.
about a family struggle to define itself religiously,
And once you forgive yourself, then usually you're open enough to ask God to forgive you, and then in those two forgiveness, you can move forward.
about soulfully grieving and spiritually growing,
See, all the time she was sick, I could go see her. Now I can't.
and in the end about rediscovering a grandfather and redefining myself. 40 years ago, my father refused to sign a religious document presented by a Los Angeles priest that demanded my mother and father's children be raised Catholic. As a result, my grandmother, who was devoutly Catholic, and my father, who was not, argued with bitter resentment and then essentially never spoke again. Each of them carrying that resentment to the grave. Also, that same priest forever closed the doors to his sanctuary, to my mother, to my family, and told her flat out she was going to hell. You might imagine how these events affected and plainly altered the course of our family's lives. For 25 years, I did not see my grandmother or my grandfather. After years of battling a great many medical maladies, including Alzheimer's disease, my grandmother died at 4:30 in the evening on September 23rd. I returned to my birthplace and would see my grandmother for the first time in a quarter century, but now I would be a pallbearer at her funeral. I came initially to offer my mother respect and love and support, a son's stability, a sense of family. In the end, it was me that was offered that by her, by an entire family I had never met, and by a grandfather that is simply remarkable. Harry Bud McNeil is 83.
What advice do you give people today? What advice do you give me?
I'll tell you this, Wendell. When you fall in love and you get married, you treat your wife as a wife, not as a stranger in your house. She's your partner. She's your life partner. And you want to keep that, or you wouldn't have married her. Keep that feeling. You do that, and she'll do it automatically. She will see that you've been kind and nice to her. She'll be kind and nice to you. You won't have anything to worry about.
Harry McNeil, my grandfather, has made a conscious decision not to return here for 1 month after the burial. That means in a few days, Harry will return here to honor LIllian, to tell her, his wife, my grandmother, that he loves her. He's used this month to show those in his life lessons, to live them. Lessons about support, generosity, honor, and grace. And he says, most importantly, show those around you that you most care about. Show them affection, show them they most matter every day.
I would tell them to keep their head on straight, first thing. And the second thing is to be kind and nice to anyone and everyone. And you'll be surprised how things can turn out for you. Don't be mean and ugly. That's for the gangs. Be nice and gentle and kind, and you'll get what you want.
My father got what he wanted back in 1958 in West Hollywood. That's when my mother said yes to his marriage proposal.
And it all began back in the late 50s when my father asked my mother for a date at this movie theater.
40 years of a loving union resulted, but in the past 24 months, my mother has lost a husband, her mother, and her health. It is a time to remember to never forget to show that respect, to honor her and my newfound family, and to collectively learn how to grieve.
I think that's what it's about, is people, when they've lost someone, they want help and they want hope. And the help comes in the remembering and sharing the memories together.
Here at the First Christian Church in Canyon Country, Reverend Haley teaches the same lessons he so purposefully delivered at the gravesite of my grandmother's funeral. Remember the good, celebrate the legacy, he says.
That opens the doors and opens the hearts. And when you have people that have open hearts towards each other, then God can use those open hearts to begin the healing process. And that's basically what it's about.
He said that heaven is just a wall away. Thank God. Heaven is just a wall away. The person isn't far. They're not lost. They're still there. They're just a wall away.
And we find ourselves thinking, I was not the grandson I could have been. I was not the spouse. I was not the sibling that I could have been. And as a minister, as a pastor, the first thing I would say to that person is, of course you weren't. None of us are.
Dr. Ken Durham teaches theology and is the minister at the Church of Christ at Pepperdine.
The way to avoid grief is not to love anything or anybody. But because we do love, because a person that we cherish becomes a part of us, when that person is ripped out of our lives, it hurts, and it hurts terribly. And so grief is the cost we pay. It's the consequence of loving. And so if we can begin to cast it in that way, I think we can deal with it a little better.
Bud McNeil knows so well about the loving.
But it is, in actuality, to yourself. It is a empty feeling. You don't have anybody you can call dear or honey or anything. It's hard to take.
Grief is a result of something wonderful. We grieve because we love.
In the end, it was a death and the grief that followed that taught me that lesson of love and presented a grandfather I never knew, a family I had never met, and a spiritual revelation that bonded a mother and a son, a transformation that will forever change me. For Odyssey Weekly, I'm Wendell Stacy in Los Angeles.